Ladies and gentlemen, it is me, Professor Hamamoto, and it is February 9th, year 2025. The time is 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I am so excited today to have this reunion with three individuals. They're also brothers. They're known as the Wilson Boys. To be reunited with them after the decades long separation. We grew up roughly in the same neighborhood. And one of the primary purposes of gathering them together with us today is to announce this brand new anthology of their short stories. They're all fiction writers. And so we'll go into the specifics, some of the stories here, the origins, how they were put together, how they were crafted. It's a really, really incredibly exciting read. And it's even more exciting for me since I resonate with the environment out of which these stories come. And we also want to, before we leave here, make sure that you order copies of this, and then don't forget to leave a review on Amazon. That will help drive the algorithms so that other people will be able to find this incredible piece of fiction here. So, with no further ado, let me bring our guests today and welcome everybody here in the live chat. Before we start, I'll also ask you if you have a question. We'll leave some time at the end for you to put some questions to our panelists here, our guests. I know that we have lots of writers and aspiring writers here, so feel free to ask them writerly questions, how to publish and whatnot. So, gentlemen, welcome from top to bottom, Hollywood Square style. We have Howard Wilson. He's the baby brother. And we have his 1 year older brother, Chaz Wilson. And we knew him as Chaz the Spaz when we were growing up. And then the older brother, who was kind of a legendary figure in my mind because he was out of the home, but we always heard stories about him. This is Mr. Bruce Wilson. He's Professor Bruce Wilson. You
That's
teach,
right.
isn't it? And each of the brothers have writing careers on their own, which you'll find out here. Now, first, let me begin with the conception of the anthology. So far as I know, this has never been done where you have brothers who compiled an anthology of their own fiction. Whose idea was it? Who wants to take credit or the
Well,
blame for it?
let me jump in here. It was sort of it was a belief all of a sudden. I think that we could do something like this. We could and should do something like this. Nobody, I don't think any of us had thought of it individually to just, hey, I'm going to talk to the brothers and see if they want to do this. It was like Kaz and Howard and I were talking. Let's do this. Let's do it. And it was, it just came upon us, and we couldn't fight it.
Okay. Now I'll let you tell the story, Chaz, about how you used to exchange stories amongst you, and then the
Okay.
other brother would finish it or complete it or add to it. How does that work?
Well, it started, I was in Turkey back in the 1990s. And Bruce and I decided that we would, just to keep me going, would send each other a sentence. And it would be the first line of a short story. And the rules were the short story had to be at least 1,000 words and had to include that sentence as the first line. And that's how we got started. We traded them back and forth. Bruce and I did. And later, not much later, Howard got in. And so he started doing it, and we just kept it up.
Okay. And for the younger viewers out there, this was in the days before the internet.
Pretty much. We were back on DOS at that time. So
Okay.
these were, the stories were typed out and sent via, snail mail.
Okay.
I had a word processor.
You
Yeah.
had a word processor, but we didn't have email, I don't think. At least I didn't have
No,
access to
no.
it.
No.
Wow. The old-fashioned way.
Didn't
Now-
even have a computer.
True. It's incredible. So who did the production end of it? Because it's not a matter of just writing the stories these days. You have to put it together, edit it, and find the retailers to put books together. Because I have a lot of people here who subscribe to this channel who are writers and want to know the process of producing a book, not just writing it, but producing it.
Somebody want
That
to jump
certainly
in?
led to a lot of the confusion and the pain of putting this book together. The first one we tried to get was a famous company that we will not name. They actually have a program within their site that will help you write and produce a book, print it and the whole thing. And it about drove me crazy for the first 4 or 5 months we worked on this thing. That I'm short of wanting to hang myself. I was happy enough to turn that responsibility over to Chaz, and
Okay.
he carried the ball after I fumbled. Essentially, we had a
All
football note today.
Well,
There's something going on at football today, right?
It's the Super Bowl, I believe.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But what happened was with that first publisher, if I may go on, Bruce, is that they completely, with the AI, supposedly,
Yeah.
edited all of our text where they just changed the wording on everything. It was like, what is this? This isn't what I wrote. And so we bailed from them as quick as we could. And then Chaz found a separate publisher who was more compliant with our needs.
Well,
And-
that's really important information to know. I didn't realize there was that problem with AI. So, Chaz, you can feel free to name the publishers that you went with,
Okay, it
because
was
they did a good job. The actual mechanics of this, they did a great
Parker
job.
Publishing.
Say it again.
Parker Publishing. They're
Okay.
out of Tampa.
Uh-huh.
We had a few bumps in the road, but for the most part, they carried the ball for us and advised me. So I became the central point of contact. And you'll see on the book, they put me down as the author. Amazon has me as the author, and so
Okay.
the others. But we all know that there were 3 authors here, but for their format, they wanted, to assign the blame to one. I'm the one they blamed. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Daryl.
No. Howard was raising his hand.
I was pointing at Chaz. We were blaming him.
No, he did a great job.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just
All the aspiring artists need to record that information, because I've heard a lot of horror stories, because there's a lot of these different sites that tell you how to get into the publishing realm, and most of them, though, are written by the publishers themselves. So just for the purpose of the audience here, you can find this book on Barnes and Noble, and I'll put the link later in the description. I think I might have already done that. And the other one is Amazon.
Also, Walmart online, and I think it's called Discount Books. I can't.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I can't remember that other company.
All right.
if you Google the book, you'll see 24 different
Oh, really?
ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
just go into, like, in Chrome, type in a Google search, Brotherhood Stories by the Wilson Boys, and then it'll pop up at least a dozen or more different
Okay.
Well,
books.
since it's print on demand, then it's access to just about everybody.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I only got 2 of the major ones, Barnes and
You do.
Noble and Amazon,
Yeah.
because we want to drive some sales here, and we also want to make sure that people leave a review and stars and whatever. So let's start from the beginning. We're going to get into some of the stories themselves, but I'm interested in the mechanics as well. Let's start from front to back. And Howard, did you do all the illustrations?
I did, yes.
I don't know if you can see it very well on the camera. There's some glare.
It glares less. There you go.
Yeah.
But if you Google it, you can get a full image.
Yes, and I was only able to capture a little bit for the pick for this show. I had to edit it out.
Yeah,
So this
You know.
is this crayon or
no, it's pastel.
pastels.
Oil pastel on
Okay. And then for the people, it's not going to show up very well out in the audience. I assume, Howard, you did all the line drawings.
I did, yes. I
In here.
initially was going to shade them all in. I shaded one, then I said, no, I'm just going to leave them as drafts. I thought it even looks better as drafts.
It reminded me of something that you would do in class while you were listening to Mr. Formula lecture on geometry or something.
Yes, I was doing it in class when I was listening to Mrs. Ginch, my second grade teacher. Discussing. I've been doodling all my life, and these are just extension of the doodles that I was doing back in 1962.
Well, Bruce, there's one that's a character name. You got to use that one, Mrs. Ginch. Is it Mrs. Ginch?
Mrs. Ginch, yeah.
Yeah, that was a real. Bless her soul. I don't know where she's probably passed on.
Yeah, I think so. It actually, yeah, I actually talked to one of her daughters maybe about 30 years ago, and she mentioned that she had passed. So
okay, and then the back, this incredible photo. Sorry, it's not showing up very well. And this, I looked at the credits. This was done by the photo.
Leslie Wilson, my lovely wife.
Okay. So much for production, and I would be remiss to not recognize the contribution of your brother, Joel Wilson, which concludes this anthology. It's quite touching. And
that was also something, Professor, that was something that it came to all three of us too, because when we talked about the Wilson boys, there were four of us. And sadly, Joel passed away back in 1970, far too early in his life. And but he had already published some poems in the Fullerton Junior College literary magazine.
Mhm.
And each of us, I think, probably simultaneously decided he's part of this. So we put him in the back only because it might have, Howard would have had to draw pictures for him, and we wanted to get the darn thing printed.
But he is included in
on the front cover.
On the cover, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
That's all
there's three poems here, and again, Joel was because he was older, and when you're a few years older, you're always the big brother who's like a godlike figure. But from what I gathered through Howard is he was a literary man even then.
Yeah.
Way back when.
Way back.
Yeah. And he was well read. All of you brothers and sisters, you had two sisters, read a lot around the house. What was the Wilson household like so far as reading material, magazines, newspapers, and books? Give me a sample.
Encyclopedias. We had two sets of encyclopedias. Well, one complete set and then one partial set. And I still remember the volumes: A Bro, Din, Gal, Hut, Mac, Piss, Steez, well. And we read through those all the time.
How about the other one, Howard? Arkville, Bill Carr, Dum, Fur, Gum, Hob, Hopper. Yeah.
And that's as far as that one went. Unfortunately.
Yeah. We're also cursed with incredible memories.
Yeah, we did, and I sort of pointed it out in the introduction to this anthology that we read everything: cereal boxes, toothpaste cartons, our mom's magazines, our dad's magazines when we could find them, in hidden spots.
Yes.
Anything, encyclopedias primarily. We read them all the time. We used those and saved a lot of trips to the library for, writing papers for school. Were they aged? Sure. These were the dollar ones you got at Vaughn's shopping bag or something like that, So we took what we had and we read, and we also talked about what we read with each other. These two guys amazed me in the later years. I don't know all the different kinds of stuff they sent to the government for stuff to read, research materials, maps and charts, and so that was. I was too busy going to college when that stuff was going on,
Mm-hmm. And for the younger viewers, again, this is before the days of Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Right.
And my idea was, like Mark Twain said, I never let school interfere with my education. I learned as much from my own reading on the outside that I did from sitting in a classroom. That's probably true now for everybody.
Now, Chaz, from what I read in the introduction, you come from a family of storytellers with your father and mother. What kind of influence did they exert on you, your narrative abilities?
Oh, I think it really aided narrative abilities. We grew up not only reading stories, but listening to stories. So when my dad's brothers, my uncles and aunts, and all of the people that came to visit us always would sit around the dining room table, the kitchen table, and tell stories. And I would be on the outside watching, listening, and listening to these narratives. And we all listened to that, and kind of stuck with us.
Tell us the story about the apples, Dad.
Yeah, we
Right,
want to
right.
know the apples.
Or we can still probably remember all of the kids that my dad and his brothers grew up with. Buddy Booker, Chucky Booker. Do you remember those names, guys? Yeah.
Those names. Yes, indeed.
So that influenced us a lot. And my mom was had a very good command of the English language, and so she made sure that when we did tell stories, that they were grammatically correct. So.
And I'd like to take this time to compliment you on your parents, both your father and mother. They were wonderful people. They always made me feel welcome at your house, and they allowed me and Howard to listen to music in the front living room late at night.
Right.
Listen to Joni Mitchell. These are memories that stuck with me all my life, and I'm forever grateful for their forbearance for this teenage boy here who would come over.
Well, to be fair, we also have two sisters.
Yes.
And I believe they read as well, and as frequently as we did. They certainly listened to all the stories, and perhaps are even watching this podcast today. I mean, they were made aware of it, but for some reason, the storytelling, the Imagineering sort of things came from the four of us boys, and to have my parents' family to start out with two boys and then two girls and then two boys, the big boys, the girls, and the little boys is what we were known as by mom and dad, plus other names that our dad used to call us. But my dad was a word creator. He would come up with words that nobody ever heard before. He made them up. And so he used those things, and we got to know what they meant. And so we could respond in this somewhat foreign language and understand what the heck my dad was talking about. And our friends wouldn't know. They would say, "What is that?" Anyway, so yeah, it was an interesting household, Daryl. It really was an interesting household to grow up in. And like many families of the era, we had our troubles and we had our great times. In fact, we were known in most of the neighborhoods we lived in as the Wilson tribe.
And an interesting thing, speaking of, some of the things we went through, for about a month in the spring of 1966, my parents had 6 teenagers in the house.
Wow.
And we were all better behaved than our parents.
It was a month. It was from your birthday to my birthday that we had the 6 teenagers living in the house.
My gosh. And I do remember, I think you're younger of the two sisters, Carol. And then you had...
She's the older of the two.
She's the older. Okay, I met her. But then again, she was older than me. So I looked her at your sisters as like the beauty queens. They're teenagers, right? And I'm like a little punky kid. So they're like goddesses. It's just, and the reason I mention this is because that poignancy runs through each of your stories, right? This conjuring of deep-seated memories and emotion, and even phantom memories. I think it was Chaz who I can't remember the name of the story. You talk about sort of a supernatural occurrence of an old girlfriend that
Oh, yes.
she kept on haunting you in a certain sense. Talk about that story. Which one is that
Okay.
called?
That one, I began to write that, and I wasn't sure. So that's
Contiguity.
yes.
Yes.
And I was set out to write a ghost story.
Okay.
Okay. And it took place, in Orange County. But the funny thing is about that, in my mind, when I wrote it, it was a ghost story. And then not most, I'll say half of the readers that read it thought that it was all in his mind. And it was not, that it was a psychological thriller as opposed to a ghost story. And I suppose you could see both of those occurrences. But it was about the early relations, building a relationship with somebody, and in the gritty Southern California area, which is, most of that is written from memory. I haven't lived there in 50 some odd years. So
Well, Bruce mentioned Imagineering, and that for me brings up the topic of Disneyland and Walt Disney. I think he coined that term, Imagineering. So, respectively, gentlemen, what was it like for you growing up in the capital where Disneyland existed, Anaheim, California?
It was a thrill because this is in one of the stories that I wrote about this Henry Valentine character, talks about how he didn't appear in the anthology. How the morning that the Valentine family were moving from San Diego to Anaheim, his elder sister Carmen mentions this. She says, "Henry, we're moving to the town where Disneyland is," and of course Henry was terribly disappointed because we ended up not moving to Anaheim, but a track home up near the Fullerton boundary, and it was like, but growing up in the Anaheim, it was just amazing. Every night you'd see the fireworks. And I live in Fullerton now, so I'm still not too far from Disneyland. And during the lockdown, when they closed the park and there was no fireworks, it was like, this isn't real. Where are the fireworks I hear at 20 minutes to 9 every night? So that's what the experience was for me. And being able to go there as often as we could, or just drive past it, going down Harbor Boulevard and seeing it and going,
right.
Now,
Bruce, you grew up, or you were born in San Diego, from what I could tell from the stories?
No, I was born in Detroit.
Oh, Detroit. Okay, way back.
My folks came from Detroit. I was born there, and I think I was probably 6 months old when my dad listened to his older brother, his oldest brother, living in San Diego, an ex-Marine car salesman. He says, "Come on out to California." So my mom and dad packed me up in a car, and they took off, and I woke up one morning and we were in San Diego, and that's where my early memories are. I went through into third grade. No, maybe even fifth grade in San Diego, but it was different house. See, our parents were Bedouins. They would buy a house, and a couple of years later, they would pack up the tent and move to another one. And so we lived just about every 2 to 3 years in a new place. First part of that was in San Diego. Then we got to Orange County, and I think that first house in Orange County, we lived there a long time.
About 6 years, 6.5.
Yeah,
6.5 years.
But the tents got rolled up, and we moved again. But Orange County became sort of our central box of memories. My high school and elementary school stuff, and the people that I knew as my friends. When we did things, played with our younger brother's toys when we should have asked first, like the cars, or asking the younger brothers to join us in some of the mid-teen kinds of functions that we did. There was a game that we made up, sort of a way to push each other around and bury your face in the dirt. And sometimes we needed help. I remember Chaz, we grabbed him one time and made him a guide for some African trip we were taking. So there were intergenerational moving back and forth and including each other. I mean, these two guys were, the ushers at my first wedding. So, and they had tuxedos on as
That's right.
12 and 10, something like that.
I was almost 14 and Chaz was 15.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was in my 20s, you looked 12.
Yeah.
Now, Chaz, did you
I was
take?
taller than you, Bruce.
No, you've always been taller than me.
Okay.
Now,
What is
Chaz,
that,
did you take any one of your many girlfriends to Disneyland on dates?
I did. As a matter of fact, I tell the story a lot about. I don't know if you remember if they had it when you worked at Disneyland, but they had date night. Do you remember
Yeah.
date night at Disneyland?
Yeah.
So it was you paid. Oh, this really ages me. I think it was $2 to get in, and they had 3 different stages: one in Frontierland, one in Tomorrowland, and one other one.
Main Street.
And parents were happy to let me go to Disneyland. Good security, no alcohol, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I did. We dated at Disneyland.
Yeah, in the couple of years that I worked there, just out of high school. So my freshman, sophomore year in college, I worked at Disneyland, and as an employee, we got free admission and front of the line privileges every Sunday afternoon. So, of course, in those days, I only had one date, and she came along, and that's the way it was. But yeah, Disneyland was there.
And Carol worked at Disneyland.
Oh,
Neat part it was in the fall of '68 when she was working there. She got a pass for me and her to go in to see Pat Paulson do a campaign speech when he was running for president with a stag party in the fall of '68. And also on the bill, which was really neat, were the 4 freshmen and Lulu. So I got to see the 4 freshmen, Lulu and Pat Paulson. He was so funny. There was a guy sitting a couple of rows away from me. He actually fell out of his seat laughing so at Paulson's routine. So that was great having these connections with Bruce and Carol that I could get into Disneyland to see something like that.
well, that's interesting. Anaheim was full of this type of culture because right in the town adjoining us in Anaheim, Buena Park was
Knott's Berry Farm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And
We
up
used
until
to go there a lot.
You could get in for free.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You had to
That
pay
was
for rides,
way better.
but you could go through the old town and everything else in Knott's for nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
And for a while we lived in Buena Park, and from the fall of '64 until the spring of '65, we lived in Buena Park. So we were just like, we just walk across Stanton, and we'd be there. And if they had Henry's livery and all kinds of neat stuff like that, you'd pay $25 and you could ride this old car.
Yeah.
It was great.
Absolutely. And they used to have some live music performance there.
Yeah.
Some pretty quality
The covered wagon thing, right?
Yeah. Outdoors. Yeah, I do remember when it was free and they started to imitate Disneyland, but they were also famous for their pies, Mrs. Knott's pies.
Knott's
Boysenberry.
Berry,
Fried chicken.
boysenberry pie.
Boysenberry, more
boysenberry.
specifically. You have the novelists, the fiction writers' eye for detail, boysenberry pie.
There's a story behind that. It's briefly, the boysenberry was created by this guy who was head of the Anaheim Parks named Rudolph Boysen. And then he forgot about him. But somebody knew about him, told Walter Knott about him. Walter found some that were still alive, brought him to his stand in Buena Park, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it started out as sort of a roadside attraction, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, a roadside.
And a chicken dinner restaurant too.
Yeah. And I haven't been there in years, but that was our focal point, and not very far away was one of the first modern shopping malls, Buena Park Mall.
Yeah.
Right
Remember
there.
that?
Yeah, we live right by that too, and we would just hang out there on a weekend sometimes and look at go to the Newberry's, and they had this huge section of all sort of Beatles memorabilia. This was in throughout '64 during the Beatlemania thing, and there'd be Beatle baseball cards, Beatle wig, all this kind of stuff. It was just amazing what they were and all that stuff, of course, really valuable now. But back then it was, if you wanted a beetle wig, you had to, you take 2 weeks allowance to pay for it.
And remember, will you rekindle these memories when I was reading your stories, Howard? Hardy shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, at the Buena
Chad?
Park Mall, and then when they came up with a new shoe style, everybody had Hardy shoes. Whatever it happened to be. They weren't the best made, and they, instead of steel shanks, they had wooden shanks. Old shoe salesman talking, but they were popular, and they caught on to the trends like that.
Well, yeah, I liked them.
And then there's the well-known story of Howard buying the moccasins.
Yeah. Yes.
And that is actually that Henry story was based in part on experience I had with the Apache boots, as they called them back then. Yeah, that was, and there was any similarity to actual people is coincidental. The Dennis Hasakawa character in that story is not necessarily meant to mean anybody in real life.
All right, I did recognize some of the characters there. So Chaz, you went to Savannah High School. I remember, Bruce, did you go to Savannah too? High school?
Yep, I was in the first class to spend all 3 years at Savannah. We went the first year I went to Savannah. There was just sophomores and juniors. This was in '61.
Good gosh.
Fall of '61, and then so we just had sophomores and juniors, and we ended up with a CIF baseball championship. The baseball team actually won the state Class A baseball.
Well, Savannah has,
So
we always had a really good baseball tradition. Howard would know this. He knows.
Yeah, I think there were 7 Major League Baseball players that went to Savannah High School through the years.
Yeah.
Name them.
Was a record for name them?
I bet.
Al Rabowski. Let me see. My memory ain't what it once was, but Al Rabowski, Al the Mad Hungarian, was probably the most famous. I think one of them might be in the Hall of Fame. He's a relief pitcher. Al
Rabowski.
Don Ossie.
Yeah, Don
Al Rabowski was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was famous, but there was one, I can't think of the guy's name. But anyway, if I had the list right here, I could tell you. But
I played Pop Warner football with Al Rabowski's younger brother, Steve.
Yeah, I remember Steve.
Yeah, he was a left-handed quarterback. And let's not forget Steve Deberg, who had a career in the NFL.
Deberg, he played. He was football.
Yeah,
NFL. He was a football quarterback, had a long career. I think they're in the top 10 in the number of hours that game. I don't know how they even measure football, but he also has a record, I think, through the most interceptions. But he was Bruce than us.
This is a bit of a non sequitur, but when Bruce was talking about the high school and he was in the very, the first grade class that went all the way through, we had so many high schools that got built all at the same time. I mean, they were 4 or 5 in Anaheim, because Anaheim just grew up from nothing into a pretty big city like that, all with this baby boom student body. So we had many, many high schools that were a little bit different. Each was a little bit different, but most of them were pretty cookie cutter.
That was the baby boom construction, because it's called Orange County because it was mostly orange groves.
Right? Yeah, when we moved to Anaheim in '57, our backyard was just behind our backyard was this huge orange grove. Within a year, that orange grove was gone, and they put in the 91. The Riverside Freeway was there, and all of a sudden we had,
and Tony used to send us out into the orange grove with a shopping bag from Vaughn's shopping bag.
This is your
Go
father.
pick oranges. Yeah, my dad. He would say, "Go get some oranges." But Dad, the farmer's got a shotgun. He's not going to shoot you. Go get some oranges. So we did. So we had fresh orange juice pretty often in those days.
The first year, and then we had rats and mice and horned toads in our yard, but that's a different story.
Now, all three of you are men of letters. I wanted to ask each of you individually, because this is before the days of Amazon. Where did you go for your books and your magazines?
Thrift stores, used bookstores.
Such
Now,
as
for sure. But in the early days, it was a library. They're the one on
Yeah.
Lincoln or Center Street, as it was in
Broadway.
those
No,
days.
it was on Broad. Oh yeah, the original one was right. It was on Los Angeles Street and Center Street. That was
And
the,
so
the Carnegie
that was the
Library.
library that I went to,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much all our choices. Or it was picking up dad's books,
Yeah.
mom's magazines, whatever
Or
we
the
could find.
school library. 'Cause,
We
you
did
know,
have the school library, and Mrs. Buchanan was the high school
Yeah.
librarian when I was there.
Yeah.
Buchanan? No.
gosh.
She was,
Yes,
Buchanan
Buchanan.
was an English teacher. She was an English teacher.
Dorothy Buchanan.
I
Yeah,
remember
and you know what?
her.
Yeah.
She
She,
was a very handsome lady.
I think
wasn't
she
she?
saw something in me as being, you know, a kid that liked to read, because she would kind of set things aside for me. She said, Bruce would like this. So I would go into the library. You know, when I never cut class, you know, I'd have to do it either at lunchtime or what was it called? Nutrition.
Nutrition.
The morning break thing.
15-minute
And I go in there and she, hey, Bruce, I like these. What do you think? And so I'd take them home. But books were like that. I remember when I was probably 8, and this is when we were still in San Diego, we had a bookmobile come through our neighborhood. There
Oh,
was
yes.
a bus
Anaheim too.
library, a mobile library. And so I went in this one particular day, and I had turned in all the books I'd read the last week, and I had walked out of the bus, you know, holding books at the bottom of my hand and my chin resting on the top. And I walked up the driveway of our house, and my dad was in the garage, as he often was, working on a car, trying to make it work. And he looked at me and he says, okay, Bruce, what are you going to read tomorrow? And I had, you know, 24 books between chin and fingertips. And that's what we did. It was the library for me, and then it became used bookstore. And I still go to used bookstores. We have one here in Las Cruces, New Mexico, that is a great place. They let me do book events about my novels.
Mhm.
The manager knows me on site. You know, it's one of those kinds of things. And I still have about $1,000 worth of credit.
And they do
Yeah.
have some thrift stores that still carry books in our area. Most of the thrift stores don't anymore. They sell them online, but I was able to pick this up. I've been compared favorably to this author by some people, and so that was Booth Tarkington's book Penrod. And
I can see that.
You're as good as Booth Tarkington.
Thank you.
I used to
Yeah.
buy my books. When I bought new books, I bought them through Scholastic Books. It was,
Right.
I started purchasing them probably in second or third grade. First book I ever bought was The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. You know, this thick. And I still have it today, that book that I purchased when I was
Wow.
9.
Yeah, when I was in sixth grade, through Scholastic, I got the Swiss Family Robinson, and I read that all the way through. That was probably the first more of a grown-up book that I had ever read before. Up until that time, I was mostly just reading, you know, Beverly Cleary kind of stuff. So that was the first grown-up book that I read, and I was amazed by it.
Oh, and then sometimes you just do it on inspiration or an old memory, Chaz. I just started reading Forrester's Horatio Hornblower stuff again. You know, so I'm like in book 3, and I bought them all from Amazon or Half Book or wherever else they come. And you know, you spend more for shipping than you do for the paperback that's used, right? But those kinds of things, I never stopped. I buy books, and when I'm done reading the ones I don't want to keep, I give them back to this place here in Cruces, and I get credit to get a whole bunch of more books. So, yeah, it's I can't read enough. I cannot read enough. I'm never just reading a single book at the same time.
No.
Well, our teachers
one book at a
inculcated.
time now. Well, because I'm also studying to teach. I teach American history at the university, so I've got to continually be up on that and something new to add to either my lectures, since most of my classes now are online, and I have to build those into the study work and so on. But got to read. Read.
Well, Howard played a part in my development of literary tastes, and that I don't know if he remembers the story, but he gave me a credit slip that he got from his cousin. His name was Terry Maynard.
Yeah.
And his
Yeah.
first, I can remember it because it was important to me, and I had almost unlimited use of Burke's books
Burke's books
on
down.
Bristol.
Yeah, it was
The
between
used bookstore.
down there, Bristol and Edinger, down in that area of Santa Ana, South Santa Ana. Yep.
That's an institution I miss. Used bookstores.
We don't have them like
Chaz, were you able to get reading material when you're overseas in English?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We had, I can't even remember. So it was when I was in Turkey, my first tour in Turkey. Somebody, and it may have been USO, I'm not sure who, but we would get boxes of brand new paper books, paperbacks rather. And most of the time they went unread by everybody, but I read every single one. I was in book heaven. So
We didn't just, Harold, we didn't just taste books. We consumed them.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
and still
not-
do. It's
Still
my
do.
guilty
Yeah.
pleasure. So I live in Idaho now, and when I moved from Washington here to Idaho, I donated over 1,000 of my books. I still have 2,500 or so still. I like around books. I like the smell. I love to read them, and they're like visiting old friends.
Mhm.
I've only got 2,000 books, Chaz, so I'm gonna have to run down to the bookstores and build up my library so it's equal to yours.
Okay. Now I want to
I've got my library split between this modular home we have here in Las Cruces, New Mexico, then our house in Silver City, and then my office at the university. So if I put them all together, I would still be shorter than these two folks.
Wow. Now I'd like to ask about the music environment of Anaheim, California, of this period. We're talking about the 50s, 60s, and 70s. However far you want to go back. What are how did the music go into your writing of fiction? Or is there any connection at all?
Well, Howard played the bassoon.
Yeah, I played the bassoon, played the guitar, right, and was
one of the stories here.
Yeah, I was a Beatle fan, like
Yeah.
like practically everybody else. I don't think any of us didn't see the Beatles on Sullivan on that February Sunday night in 1964. We were all, consumed by that for a while, and we listened to the pop music. But it's kind of, none of my stories actually is focused on it beyond the bassoon playing that I mentioned in one of my short stories.
Mm-hmm.
So the music of the period that we grew up, it's always in my mind. It's always in my life. And I usually will mark a moment in my lifetime by whatever the music was playing at the time. I mean, I can remember, the first kiss, the first this, the first that, or some occurrence that what was playing on the radio at the time. Now, I only alluded to that a little bit in one of my stories, but that took place in the 1980s in Italy. But it still was referring to popular music, which I'm sure, like everybody, it affects our lives.
Was that Mandy?
What's that?
Was that Mandy?
No, that was a Bruce's.
No,
that's your story. Okay.
Yeah, mine was
story is about
like Cyndi Lauper.
Oh, girls just want to have fun.
Yeah.
Or the Danger Zone or something. Bebop, Shebop.
Yeah. Well, it was actually the story was the girl. The story was if I could speak Italian.
All right, I remember that.
You take a look at. I went in a little bit of detail in her clothing. She was dressing just like Cyndi Lauper.
Right, and you did paraphrase some lyrics there. I caught that.
Yeah,
I caught the references.
And Mandy came from actually having an earworm.
Okay.
And most of the earworms I get are those old songs that we knew from high school, and they go into my head, and they won't go until I start humming the theme song from Indiana Jones. Then it sends it away. So
it's like I was watching an episode of Maverick, and so all yesterday morning, "Riverboat Ring Your Bell, Very well, Annabelle was running through my mind until I had to find something
Buck
else.
is the lady that he loves the best.
Right.
Terrible. You ought to know this, everybody. I think it's the same for all of us that grew up in that time. I bet
Yeah.
most of us can still remember the radio jingles that were on KHJ or KFWB or KRLA.
KRLA.
You couldn't skip commercials either on TV in those days. So you could, so get in your mind, you could take Salem out of the country, but you can't take the country out of Salem. We'd have that going through as well. Or Winston tastes good like a cigarette should, that kind of stuff.
It's
But
a
remember
dead
this.
art jingles.
Remember this, guys. Crest has been shown to be an effective decay preventive dentifrice when used in a conscientiously applied program of oral hygiene and regular professional care.
Good Lord.
The back of
all
the
them are
Crest
a bit
box.
deranged.
Well, our teachers really have their work.
Let me redirect something here too. I
Please.
wanted to say something, Howard, about your stories. Okay, about your Henry stories,
Yes.
and how moved I was. One, to be, who was I? Brad? I think I was Brad in the story.
Yeah, you were Brad. He was Larry.
But seeing those stories from your perspective, and I know you put a whole lot of realism in that because there was no reason to do anything other than to cheer things up a little bit. But those stories, to me, told a larger story than just each episode of the 5 that we have in our book. Chaz, you and I've had this conversation. Howard needs to put all of that in a novel.
Oh, I want to read that.
He needs to do just like Booth Tarkington did with the Penrod stories.
Okay.
Because I think that I will argue that
it can be
Henry
done.
stories are just as good as Penrod's.
It should be done. So we're gonna needle you a little bit out.
Okay.
When we were talking about, getting the book published, I had to go back and forth with the publisher to make corrections. So I was reading and rereading all 15 of those stories with alarming regularity. And every time I read Howard's stories, I laughed again. I think they're so funny. They are just funny stories. Anyway,
well, I was chuckling and reading each of your stories. I'd be sitting there and starting to laugh to myself. Just certain turns of the phrase or observations or the way you held up a certain event or object for scrutiny. And of course, I knew Howard, so I could kind of catch some of the otherwise oblique references that he's making. I mean, I was an eyewitness to his crush on this girl in math class.
Right.
The Henry story. I
You
picked
were
that up,
there.
Howard.
What?
I said I picked that up immediately.
Yeah.
Now I want to, we're kind of moving towards the top of the hour now. I want to see if anybody in the chat room who might have a question about writing, publication, creative work. If you want to chime in here, we'll put you up on the screen here, and one of the Wilson brothers can address your question. Anybody? My glove, yeah. I can see it now.
Yeah, Beach Boys, right? No, I don't know.
East Coast
Yes,
girls
Beach Boys.
really.
That was our era.
But, Daryl, my middle name is Lee. I am Bruce Lee.
You were the original Bruce Lee.
I taught him everything he knew.
Okay.
That's probably why he's dead. I don't know.
The 1-inch punch.
But Mike Love was in fact cousin to the Wilson brothers, who became the Beach Boys.
Right. The ones in Hawthorne. Says Howard is like, what's my assignment again? I don't understand the question. Is that a question? Do you?
Yeah.
Do you get it, Howard?
I get the point. I think you're the Chandelier Delight is kind of suggesting that Howard's kind of pushing for what the assignment is.
Yeah, like Howard says, do I have to do that? I'm really happy with what, you guys do all the work. I'll just send you my stories. You get them published.
Oh, I see. Man. I see.
You get extra credit for the drawings, Howard.
No, no, I agree. I mean, I'm outside the family, but I would like to see a novel expression. I was thinking like the Pat Hobby stories, right?
Yeah.
Fitzgerald.
Hey,
Oh yeah,
let me do a quick commercial if I could, then we can answer
Please.
that question. Okay.
Please.
This is my first novel that I published in 2016 called Death in the Black Patch. Historical fiction takes place in Kentucky in 1906, okay, about our great grandparents. And then 4 years later, this first spinoff was No Place That Far, takes a character from the first book and brings him out to the west, down to Arizona, Texas, Mexico, and so on, called No Place That Far. Again, available at Barnes & Noble and at Amazon. So reviews there would be helpful as well. And then, although I don't have a cover in my hand yet, my third book called Muckrakers 1917 comes out in August of this year. Same publisher, and so now I can do a box set whenever the time comes.
Wonderful. And
Yeah,
you,
I had to get the commercial in.
no, absolutely. And while we're at it, the three of you are going to do an in-person book signing, book party. Can we have that information for
Yeah,
people who can go?
yes. On April 26th of this year at the Barnes and Noble bookstore in Emerich Heights, Fullerton, out on it's on Malvern at Gilbert. We'll be having a book signing. We'll all three be there, and the books will be for sale, and we will be signing. And it's Barnes and Noble, not Bones and Marble.
Okay. That's
So
in
you know
Fullerton.
what, guys? While I'm at it, Mary says we should get a kind of a team T-shirt. You know,
Okay.
That'd be nice.
All right, Bruce, you do it.
stories by the
Mhm.
Wilson boys.
I'm at
We need
XXL.
some merch. Let's see what people's dinosaur. I saw it coming in our history. I'm not understanding that question. Why would anyone want to publish via Jeff Bezos? That's Amazon, I guess.
But we didn't use Amazon as our publisher.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we did not do that. We just used them as a conduit for sales. Our publisher was Parker Publishing. So
Okay. And yeah, I buy from Amazon all the time. I'm not shilling for it, but I am a member of Amazon Prime because I buy so many books.
they're very convenient and they're easy.
Yeah, they deliver right to your door. Oh, I got that one already.
Yeah, and I actually have a real publisher for my novels. So, and he's a wonderful guy from Tijeras, New Mexico, and he took my
Mhm.
books right away, and no cost to me. All I got to do is do the writing and the editing.
Wonderful. You've got a publishing deal.
Yep, I did.
All
Yeah.
right. But on that theme, someone asked, Mikey D says, how do you get something published without knowing someone or being connected? Gentlemen?
Sure.
That's I'm not sure that I have the right answer to that, but I will tell you what we did was that we ferreted out a publisher for ourselves. And we stumbled while we were doing it. It took us 2 tries to get somebody that would cooperate with us.
Mhm.
There's also, I met a publisher just this past summer, who that I'm probably will go to next. I'm working on a novel right now, and I'm going to ask this publisher that's in Boise, Idaho, to take that on. Look them up. You can find publishers, on the internet. You can find somebody nearby, and that's always a start. They may or may not be able to get you exactly what you want, but there are a lot of pretty good folks out there that will point you in the right direction.
Mhm. My observation is that it's getting the barriers to entry in publishing and broadcasting, such as the show here, are really, they've lowered considerably, right? In the old days, you needed an agent and you need to get with a
Oh,
publishing house in New York.
Yeah, Heart Court Brace and Doubleday and all the other ones. You had to go through the big guys.
Right.
Or writing, bad stuff. There was always Midwood and Tower and those, pulp publishers.
Mhm.
Yeah, I got a royalty check 2 weeks ago for $1.74
Oh,
for a whole quarter. For a whole quarter.
Wow,
Well,
that's pretty good.
Ebooks. They were giving them away, and yet I still get credit for the 50% sale price or something. I don't know.
Hmm. Well, yeah, if anybody who's in the chat room wants to do this for a living, don't give up your day job. You're going to need the salary to
Yeah, that's for
subsidize your
sure.
passion.
Wait till you're on Social Security.
Yeah, let the government subsidize. My wife is she's sold.
Fiction
Okay.
expert, sold.
Good.
All right, Corky.
And again, reviews,
There
Daryl,
you
as
go.
you mentioned early on, are
Yeah.
key to and building a following. I have a neighbor across the street has been my sponsor almost for this neighborhood that I live in. She
Mhm.
talks to everybody about my books. So I talked to her
Good.
today and she says, "How do I get to this podcast?" And so she's probably listening today. Thank
I
you,
would give her-
Kathy.
I would give her
Yes,
10% of the
wonderful.
royalty you just got, Bruce.
Pardon?
Give her 10% of that royalty that you just got.
Yeah, there you go.
And you could also set up for free, unless you wanted the ad-free version, accounts on X or Twitter. That's
Yes.
a pretty good marketing.
Yeah.
In fact, I posted your links to my Twitter account so people can buy
And we're
through
very
there.
thankful too.
Yeah, very much appreciated.
Of course. I want to promote talent and conversation and discussion, tabletop storytelling. I want to keep it alive. I want the younger people to set their cell phones aside and start writing, start
That's
listening
one
to
thing you have to do,
storytelling.
though. And Corky, mention this to your wife. You do have to step out and write it and put it out there for people to read.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Open
Yeah,
yourself up for criticism. If it
Yeah.
doesn't kill you, you'll get better.
Okay. Says, aren't Hollywood writers suing AI companies for copyright infringement? Do you know anything about GPT or DeepSeek or these so-called AI writing programs?
I don't know.
Oh, that's
Don't know.
that's all new to me.
Well, we rejected that handily in that first attempt at putting our book together. Those folks were trying to turn these into essays for 10th grade English class or something.
They butchered
It was
our book.
terrible.
Yeah.
They had no concept of what it meant to be creative, that our
Uh-huh.
voices were already in those stories. And so with the Parker group that Chaz did find, they listened. They
Mhm.
listened to us. It was still a fight for a while,
Mhm.
but they listened. And that's the key in finding somebody that's not going to mess with your work. Now, they have editors for a purpose. You know, they have content issues, they might have length issues, but you're the writer, you're the author. And so, Mrs. Corky, keep doing what you're doing. Write stories and write a novel, and you'll be surprised what you can get when people are willing to sit down and listen to you.
Absolutely. I second that one. This is a question about a Air Force Base in Riverside. My father was stationed there. I thought he said the Enola Gay I thought the Enola Gay was at the Smithsonian.
Maybe
Yeah,
it is.
our dad is buried at the
March.
Air Force Base in Riverside, March Air Force Base.
March, yeah.
That was
I don't-
way out in the east part of Riverside. It's not really near the Orange County
Right.
end of Riverside County.
Okay. Any Orange County questions? No
Are there any
kidding.
orange groves left? There we go.
Humans and AGI, Corky's. I guess that's artificial general intelligence.
I like human intelligence better.
Okay.
Me
Whenever I
too.
find it, which is rare.
It's more meaningful and real.
Oh, here's a very specific question.
Georgia.
Gibson Murphy.
Well,
Thank you.
as a professor, and maybe Times New Roman 12-point font is what I always use.
I like
Yes.
Georgia.
Okay.
I like Times New Roman too. 12
So do I.
point.
Times New Roman 12.
Well, it looks like what we used to type on a typewriter.
Yes. And it's the default one on Word, isn't it? The font.
Yeah, it is. But,
So it makes it easy.
I always scroll on it.
Let's see what else. Literary questions.
You guys remember these, right?
What's that?
Oh, look at that.
Is that a cell phone?
Yeah, this is an old portable I'm trying to trade up to like a 1906 Smith Corona or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
Typewriters.
Get it $20 for it.
Yeah, I had an IBM Selectric too. That's the last typewriter I ever had. So what's the next best thing? Can't recreate the past. Serious concern the coming generations will not be able to do long form read, says Abigail Adams.
If they
What's
want
your
to,
opinion?
they can if they
Yeah.
want to. We had people in our generation that didn't read. They would
True.
just sit in front of the TV, or that's always been a case. Or my wife wanted to give a friend of mine a bookmark. And said, "Why bother? I don't read." So
Oh, no.
If you're at an
Oh.
age that you still have children, if there are any that are in your audience today that have children, read to them.
Yeah.
Just read to them and instill in them the love of the written word,
Right.
and it will stay alive.
And as educators, we can demand from our students that, you can't just do this. You have to think creatively. You have to write
Yeah.
creatively. You have to live by focusing on what's really there and put it down in the words.
Yeah.
You can't, don't give me an AI essay because I can tell, actually, capitals are capitals and you don't put I with the little dot on top. That I know when you're doing stuff on your weekly discussion, and I know when you got something else writing that essay at the end of the semester.
Mhm.
And folks,
Yeah.
that's a good way to get an F in my class.
So don't rely on Chat GPT.
Nope.
Read to them babies and ask. Oh, that's a good one.
Open-ended
Ask open-ended
questions.
questions.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's the written word, but also from I'm getting, because both of your parents were storytellers, the oral tradition, the spoken word, I should
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
Okay, we
Well,
have
we
another
used to
vote
take-
for. Go ahead,
There
Howard.
we go.
We used to take some of those stories and other ideas as when we were kids, and because we had, very small allowances, right? Maybe a quarter a year or something like that. But we would create stories. My brother Joel and I would come up with a story and create a play on a Friday night, and then pass the word that we were going to produce that play in our garage on Saturday. And we would sell tickets. Joel would make the snacks like cookies or Jello or something, and we'd have a play. Kids would come in. We would save the big fat old chair for the rich girl down the street.
Mm-hmm.
Chaz, what was her name?
The rich girl.
Yeah, there was a family, a blended family, a couple of houses down that lived at the corner.
Roxanne and Robin.
Yeah. So she'd
One's with
have
a
to
pet
pay a
monkey.
quarter for the comfy chair or something like that. So, but we would produce a play in an afternoon, and neighborhood kids would come to that play. That's another way of storytelling, right? We made this stuff up. And
one time you had a contest, and I won the comfy chair, and you were doing Dracula, and I was heckling Joel, and he walked up to me and slapped me.
Oh no!
interactive theater.
For those of you out there that are, if you're stuck and you can't get one of your stories going, maybe try what Bruce and Howard and I did. Get somebody to work with and have that person give you a sentence and say, "Here, make this into a story."
Yeah.
We turned out a lot of garbage, but occasionally we were able to put something good.
Here's one. Call me fish meal.
What was that?
Call me fish meal.
Yes, there you go.
Well, the technique obviously works. I encourage everybody who's listening and on replay to get this book. If you're a writer, aspiring writer, or just admire great fiction, this is something that you need to take a look at. And again, the barrier for entry is really low now. I mean, quality materials now being able to be disseminated amongst the general public. So please support the Wilson boys, credible fiction, and now you got the whole backstory behind it. And for those of you who are watching, produce your novel, your fiction, and we'll have you back here on the show interviewing you with your backstory. So to conclude there, to any of you gentlemen, and I know, Bruce, you already teach fiction, but do you take students on privately for consultation or mentoring or tutorials?
I would if they showed an interest. And most of my students just want to get through the class. They would love me to give them all A's, but they don't earn them. And so I have, 25 or 30 students in each section of an online class. Last semester, I had 3 sections. To this one, I only have 2. So I'm teaching 50, 60 kids in a course of a week, and they have to read. Oh my gosh, you may have to read the chapter. Well, if you want to answer this question, you do. And if you want to pass the course, you do. So I'm not finding that in many of my history classes. When I was teaching composition, it was different. I had people knew they had to learn how to write for college, but then I had a chance to look at work and have to suggest to them, that's a pretty good way of looking at that thing. You put a good spin on it that doesn't sound the same as coming out of, your 10th grade English class.
Yes.
Yeah, as Kathy says, make it fun. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the best we can do.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. Concluding comments, observations. Are either of you interested in doing a Wilson Boys podcast, vidcast, such as this?
Not for me.
Okay.
But
I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
I don't know.
No,
If I
I
got
mean-
invited, I'd be there, but
Okay.
depends on what they serve. Oh, sorry.
No. Yeah. Hey, we got a $5 super sticker. There's big money in this. Okay. It's bigger
That's
than the
for
royalty check.
polypharmacist. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. Polypharmacy. I think writing and reading fiction is a much better way to go than polypharmacy.
And if you
But we
can't
get
write
the idea.
fiction, there's always nonfiction. I did write
Yeah.
some articles for Baseball Hobby News back in the 80s, and so
Okay.
I really enjoy doing that. So writing nonfiction could be good too if you have something to say or something of interest.
Mhm.
I put a lot of humor in practically everything I write. That's my nature.
Absolutely. So will there be another collaboration with the Wilson boys amongst
Certainly.
you?
Possibly.
At some point.
Yeah.
At some
Yeah.
point, we
You never
must.
know. This just sort of came out of nowhere. Just sitting down at a Carl's Jr. eating burgers, and next thing you know, we were like Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. Hey, let's put a book together. We just might do it again.
Well,
Just like
I think
those
the
shows.
one thing that we have, the collaborative things that we can do as you continue to get your novel, which you've already written in your head, onto paper, we can work on those things together. And as Howard develops his and
Yes.
and fills the gaps between those episodes with a bridge of
Mhm.
some kind, and we get the
Mhm.
novel of the Valentine, not the massacre, not the day of celebration, but the Valentine family.
Uh-huh.
Those are things that we can do as brothers, as part of the Brotherhood, even if, all you do is you want a blurb, I can write a blurb on both books. I'll be able to write a blurb that'll go on there, published author, it looks good on the back cover.
Mhm.
Just have
So
to change
this
your
is
name.
you're like the Inklings. Remember C.S. Lewis and
Oh
that
yeah,
group?
J.R.R. Tolkien,
Electronically linked Inklings.
Charles Williams. Yeah, cool.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Oh, it's been fun.
Buy
Well,
this book, ladies and
Gerald,
gentlemen.
thanks for the invite too. Really.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for doing this for us, Gerald. Really appreciate it. And
Chaz,
to
it's
the
good to see you
people that are
again.
out there watching us, thanks for showing up.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Howard. This
You're
is number
welcome.
5 for you and me.
Yeah, my 50th appearance on this program.
All right, gentlemen. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.